Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here today with another one of your questions about work. And this one is one of these bedeviling things in not just startup tradecraft, but anybody who's really trying to sell something or persuade somebody to use something. And so for those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future work. James is my partner in our fund. And one of James's special areas of expertise is the secrets of once you've invested all this time and effort to actually make something, how do you showcase it to others in a demo in a way that works? So, James, I'm just going to be quiet and let you wisdom on the things that people should know.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like I've been lucky in my job to see some of the best demos in the world. There was a time when I sat in a room and I saw the first demo that at least that I'd seen of, sort of Siri, or the first demo of Evernote, or the first demo that I'd seen of, Dropcam. And the thing that struck me is that in each of those cases, the founder had this almost effortless quality around communicating and telling a story that I just don't see that often. And it just strikes me that, sort of you spend all this time painstakingly figuring out what to build, and then you spend all this time building it, and then someone throws off a demo in which they go through 5 checklists, right? And you go tick, tick, tick. You get nowhere. You convince people of nothing. I think sort of you and I were talking a little bit earlier about how the best demos are like magic tricks, but they're almost like sleights of hand, right? That in which you do this graceful job of directing attention and also setting expectations. And the thing that strikes me so often about great product demos is, you realize that you are in total control of the environment and you get to set up and decide what success looks like. And it is funny to me that often, as a founder who's painstakingly built this product, folks won't spend that time to do the very boring things, right? The very boring things of saying, you know what, actually, this is what success looks like. Maybe if you're not Steve Jobs, you set it up and you just say very straightforward, this is what success looks like. If you're a genius, you manage to hint what success looks like, and then you get to knock it out of the park. And the fascinating thing to me is that work is just not done, right? And it feels like such a wasted opportunity.
Well, I think there are examples in every occupation, including ours, of the work that is important but boring. Like a lot of our work is list making of who we're going to reach out to. So in the context of a demo, so let's assume somebody says, okay, I buy it. I should put in real time to make this demo great. What I hear you saying about setting up what success looks like is the context for telling the recipient of the demo, here's the context for what we're trying to do here. Is that what you mean? Maybe like, what did that look like for a Dropcam or Evernote or one of those other great demos of history?
I mean, I think when sometimes, of course, it's just because the technology is so amazing, and we all have.
Let's set that one aside.
Well, but part of it is like in that case, though, what's hidden is that everyone has enough context. They understand enough about the problem to know what is amazing. But more often than not, nobody knows what amazing is. You have to tell me what amazing is. There's this great guy, Jeff, who did this demo of Meteor, which is, like a programming framework, which sounds really boring to everyone, right? But he was just so effortless about doing step after step and telling someone, this is going to be hard for this reason, or this is why this is different, or this is how this is like, aren't you surprised by this? And what was amazing about what Jeff did with Meteor is that even the least technical person in the room left it feeling like, oh, I think I've seen something special. Cool. I don't really understand this, but something happened here.
Like the demo in some ways that like Ryan Peterson did for the early Flexport product. What is it? It's a web app where you see this order that you made. But what made it incredible was not that he showed what they built. He showed the status quo. And the status quo looked like a mainframe terminal from the 70s. And then all of a sudden something was just a modern web app was like, holy shit, that's magic. And it kind of makes me think of the last scene in Signs, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, or Prayer for Owen Meany. It's like all these things you've carefully arranged as here are these clues along the way that all of a sudden come together in like, oh, wow, that was really cool. And is that what you mean by sleight of hand? Like, what's the sleight of hand that you're talking about?
The sleight of hand is just figuring out how to manage someone's attention, right? Like, I don't know, I could, like, done badly, you can focus on 80 million problems with any software product or any experience, right? And that expert focusing on, hey, look at this and be impressed by that, sort of like that's the trick. I think about what's another great example. Another great example is like John Britton's demo of Twilio, in which sort of at the end of it, he had this little magic trick in which at the end of it, you would get a text from everyone, right? Or everyone would get a text. And he just so effortlessly built it and almost casually. But the truth is he spent all this painstaking time making sure to highlight exactly what the features that he wanted to highlight, but all within this story. And I feel like giving canned demos is here's one thing. Giving canned demos is not a bad thing. That you should actually like the great magicians. So just going back to the magic part, the great magicians are great because they do the same thing over and over again, but they know the 50,000 variations of what might happen and they're prepared to deal with it.
And they also can make it, because they've done it over and over again, it feels natural. It almost feels to me when you're describing it, what I see in my head is a cooking show on TV where they only show you that bit where it like comes out of the oven. They don't show you all the stuff. And a frequent error that I feel like I see in demos a lot is that the presenter forgets what is of interest to the user trying to solve the problem.
That's right.
And instead focuses on the things that were difficult to build, or they're almost like they're doing a demo for their own team to reward them for all their hard work. And oftentimes the relationship between what's difficult to build and what's interesting or valuable to the recipient is that they're totally unrelated. And like the kind of thing that I think doesn't work is when someone's like, trust me, this is really hard. It's like, you got to set that up.
You got to set it up. And also this is the other part of the attention. When you manage someone else's attention, you're managing their attention to what they find interesting, right? That you are directing, like you've got to have the empathy to think about what it's like on their side and what they'll be looking at. And that, of course, is what the best magicians do.
Yeah. And as you know, I mean, my general thing on fundraising demos is I think most of the work happens before you get in the room on the fundraise, on what's the reason to believe and who makes the introduction. The one major exception to that is the moment of the demo. That moment you're like, you just release the dramatic tension that you've built on what the problem is by satisfying the recipient, in this case, a VC.
And sometimes when it's done badly, you'll be like, oh, let me turn it over to my engineer and let him do some random things that nobody really understands, right? And then when it's done really well, right? When it's done really well, it's like, let me turn it to my engineer, who, by the way, I've made practice this 1,000 times. But then it seems like, oh, just so you know, it gets able to play dumb.
And like getting outside in feedback on it, friendlies to review, that kind of thing, I think can be valuable. And, I'll just say, for those who are in the Bloomberg Beta portfolio, they may know this, but we do these monthly gatherings where founders swap tips with each other. And so, they're very practical. It's named after, we call them turpentine talks, after this Picasso quote that like when the real artists get together, they don't talk about form and structure and meaning. They talk about where do you buy the cheap turpentine. And this is an example of the kind of thing that I feel like founders who have a business that depends on its product. Not all businesses depend on their product, but when they do, the founders who can showcase that, man, they just have such command over this particular skill. And so our next turpentine talk is about demos.
And there's a story that it requires like crazy charisma or unusual founder magic, and that's not true.
It's practice.
It's practice
and empathy with the audience. I love that insight too. It is not automatic. Steve Jobs was not magical by nature. He was magical by effort. In a lot of ways. And so I think that's a generalizable lesson. All right. Well, that is today's
I've got a list of some of my favorite demos of all time that sort of I put together with John and Gene and a couple other folks on Twitter. And I am always looking for more great demos.
Oh, I love that.
Like it is like the secret, right?
And even teardowns from you of what makes a great demo would be interesting. Like you narrating almost the director's commentary of it, I think would be fascinating. But maybe we'll link to some of those on the thread. And not advice, because we're not telling you like here's precisely how to do it. It's more like here's our experience of what works, and you take it for yourself. And if folks have other questions that they want input on one of these This Is Not Advice sessions, feel free to ask. We're easy to find on the internet, or comment on this one. Demos just provoke a lot of passion among startup people. So there you go.
I hope so.
To be continued.